Hi guys, this is a short tutorial on health and safety. It's about organising for health and safety as a trade union activist in a workplace that doesn't have union recognition. How to represent your members when you don't have a deal with management to bargain on their behalf. How to speak up for them on the grounds of health and safety. We'll do things like how to push for better rights in other areas in a later video. But this one's about health and safety. It's very often you might be, for example, working in a so for example a care home that was or some other day service unit or whatever that's been spun off into the private sector from the council a few years back, perhaps. No longer has union recognition, but nonetheless you and your friends are members of Unison or one of the other unions, and you want to and there are issues that people want to put to management. So in care homes it's things like violence. You know, I've worked in places where the service users, whether they realise what they're doing or not, the residents can hurt you, and the staff obviously don't like it. And you, as a trade union activist, as a social activist, might want to do something about this. We have to use the organising model to do this, but what I'm going to talk about is the organising model is the way in which you as a activist on the shop floor include all the other union members in pushing for better rights by getting organised, using certain techniques, mapping the workplace, using techniques to build up confidence amongst yourselves to push for better rights. It's not something that's top down where senior officials will come and bargain on your behalf. And the organising model is where you will be encouraged by the union to push as far as you can, and the union will only really gets involved in if there's any legal issues at a later date. But the problem, there's good sides and bad sides to the organising model. The good side is that it becomes something that you, as the people on the ground floor, what the union does is up to you. You have the choice to make more decisions than the old-fashioned way in which trade union leaders would turn on the power of the union on and off like a tap. You have much more control. There are criticisms, but this video isn't about whether or not the organising model is good or bad. When it comes to what we're talking about in this tutorial, it's a good thing. But there are major obstacles in your way to pushing for better things in your workplace when you don't have union recognition. The ultimate aim is to get union recognition. To do this, you'd need to be working in a firm with a bargaining unit of more than 21 people, where you are confident of winning a ballot to say that the people who work there would like the union to be in charge of negotiating their rights. So, but that will be the ultimate aim. But before that can happen, you've got to get organised. You as the social activist, and you may already have been acknowledged as being the steward there, even if you don't have recognition. The union, you might have contacted the union and said, yeah, I've got loads of mates in the union, we want to do more. They might say, well, you volunteered, you are, we want you to do more, and we might perhaps call you the workplace contact or something like that, before moving you on to giving some training as a steward. once it's known in the workplace amongst the members that you are the person to go to, it's very easy to be quite patrician-like, whether you're a man or a woman, and start, they'll tell you, can you go and sort this out with management? You go march into the manager's office, and it's sort of, you have to be sure whether that's a good thing or a bad thing to do. If there will come a point where you will go into the manager's office and say something, and you need to be sure of your footing. With health and safety, in the public sector, where we have union recognition, we've had it for like 100 years. We're covered in health and safety. We're covered by the Safety Reps and Safety Committees regulations 1977, which is a very powerful piece of legislation. It gives safety reps, union safety reps, a hell of a lot of influence in we have the right to inspect workplaces, to inspect documents, to set up committees, to have the right to investigate accidents, all this sort of stuff. It's very, very powerful. But where you don't have recognition, say you're in a privatised workplace and there is no, for whatever reason, there is no recognition, you will be governed by, as far as health and safety is concerned, you'll be governed by the Health and Safety Consulting Employees Regulations 1996, which is a very weak piece of legislation. Well, it has its moments. The good thing about this legislation, and it comes from Europe, because up until 1996, the only time you would get employee representation in workplaces on health and safety would be where you've got union recognition, and the European Union said no, you have to consult. All workers need to be consulted on health and safety. It's not because it's a radical, Europe is a radical left-wing organisation. It's because it's well understood in health and safety theory that if you include workers in your practices, you can reduce accidents in a major way. There's some research done by universities that show with a safety committee you can reduce accidents by half. Which is a massive effect on the well-being and safety of you and your workmates. So that's why even though Europe is not a left-wing organisation, it still pushes for workers to be included. The bad thing about these regulations is that it was written by British politicians and technicians who aren't particularly I believe weren't particularly happy giving workers extra rights. So I'll give you an example why I think this is. The regulations, the health and safety consulting with employees regulations say that you must either consult with all the staff individually, or you may choose, as the boss, may choose to hold elections for representatives, which is all, you might think that's brilliant, and in many ways it could be useful. The problem is, if you scroll down a little bit on the regulations, you'll find that 2 or 3 lines later it says if you choose not to any longer recognise employee representatives, you may tell them that you're no longer going to do it and choose to consult individually again, which basically, so all the efforts you might put in as a social activist to get elected as a representative of employee safety, which is different from a safety representative. They're two different things in law. Well, yeah, theoretically they're the same, but they've got different rights, some different rights. So you might have put a huge amount of effort getting yourself elected as the representative of employee safety, and then suddenly find that you are no longer the representative of employee safety because your boss says so. Now he's not able to go, well, I didn't like Tom, is a bit of a pain in the neck, so I decided to choose someone else. He can't just choose someone else. He either has the person who's been elected by the workers, or he chooses to consult with everybody individually. So this might be why, if you work in private firms, you might notice every staff meeting you have, there's a health and safety section where they will talk about a risk assessment, or tell you that we're bringing in new equipment, and sort of seek your views. What they're actually doing is consulting with you as individuals. There might be 30 people in the room, asking all the 30 people, have you got any views? And then writing them down if there are any. They're satisfying that part of the regulations, their duty to consult. Now consultation isn't just about telling you what's going on. Consultation is an exchange of views where the boss must take into account the views spoken. Now, it doesn't have to take into account, I mean, if people are putting in crazy ideas, it doesn't have to even acknowledge them. So it's quite useful to have consultative rights. So if you come up with if you, as a social activist who's recognised by the union as perhaps a workplace contact or a steward, you can come up with some good ideas. Say, well, this machinery, or let's take an example of violence in the workplace. You could say perhaps you're in a staff meeting. You can say, they can say, well, we've got a new resident coming, and you can say, is there any history of violence? And then immediately get called negative and all the rest of it. But once you've got past all that, you can say, you can put forward, well, okay, there might be a history of challenging, we call it in the business challenging behaviour, but it comes down to basically challenging behaviour is the nice way of talking about violence when it's I won't get into the social model and the medical model, but it's basically PC way of saying violence. Anyway, so you can say, well, okay, there's challenging behaviour. Are you going to give us any training? Can you send us the paperwork that must have come through from the previous home they were in? So you can say these things. And you can consult with the employer. And you can show to all the people in the room that you are the person who's pushing to protect them. If there are elections, you also have to be careful of the fact that there may have been elections, 5 years ago, for a representative employee safety. The regulations don't say how often they must have regulations. The HSC gives a little bit of guidance. HSC is the Health and Safety Executive, but you don't. It's very, very vague. It's a poor piece of legislation, but it may be if you're used to negotiating with employers. There's little bits in there that you can use to strengthen your hand, to get you in a position where even before recognition you've got a seat at the table. So if you can get yourself elected as the representative of employee safety, don't get confused with that and a safety representative. A safety representative has the right to do an inspection of a workplace, and the representative of employee safety doesn't. If I remember rightly, that's the case. Which means, but then again, if you're working in a care home, you're going to know all the hazards in the place anyway. So if you can get yourself elected as the representative of employee safety, you will start to get a reputation amongst your workplace for somebody who gets who starts to get things done. Now, I was just saying a minute ago to be careful. You may have somebody already, maybe a representative of employee safety, might have been elected 5 years ago, have been may be the boss's best mate, may have been given promotion, is now working in the office, may not be somebody who represents the workers in any meaningful sense. Though we do have some good activists that are senior officers. But sometimes the two things are incompatible. Not always, but sometimes they are. And you may have to push for for new elections, you don't have any specific rights to do that. The HSE has got some guidance about it. So you may find some of your rights, you are supposed to go to a safety committee and a representative of safety before, in any normal sense, if you've got any hazards to report, or any negotiations, any points you want to make, any complaints you want to make, before any real whistleblowing. In an emergency, you can do it. Now, if somebody's already got the position and they're useless, it makes things really difficult for you. So there are parts of the Employment Rights Act that say that the Employment Rights Act says how somebody can be dismissed, or when it's fair to dismiss somebody, and you have to look out for some lines. I'd recommend that if you are a social activist taking part in industrial relations in privatised workplaces, that you read the Employment Rights Act so you know what your rights are. You have to be careful if the boss's mate is holds these sort of positions. But anyway, even if there is no representative employee safety, so you might have the situation where there's a safety committee set up of mostly managers with a few people who are supposed to be representing the staff. You are supposed to put things through there, complaints through there. But it may not be in your eyes a valid organ to run things through, but the HSE might think it's enough for them to show that they are obeying the law. So you might have to fall back to writing petitions and things like this. But there are plenty of protections for you, but you may not find there's automatic unfair dismissal on health and safety grounds. There should be. It depends how they've. The laws are very complicated business. But anyway, that's. Just a couple more things. I've just gone to very quickly to look up some of the rights of representatives of employee safety. Yes, you have fewer rights than a union safety rep, but you as the union candidate to become a representative of employee safety in an election, you wouldn't have the union safety rep powers, but you would have the ability to make representations to the employer, to both generally and specifically on things that the employers come to you about. So he's said, well, I'm getting new machinery, or we're getting a new resident, or whatever, and so you have specific powers to do that. You also have the right to seek information, to say, I'd like to see the risk assessment on this new member of staff, for example, and because that's something that the employer's got to keep, you'll have the power to see it. So that's the advantage for the. So that's the pest. So anyway, yes. So that's the advantage of getting elected as a workplace representative. If that place is filled, go back to normal organising methods, petitions, having meetings outside work. You're not, until you have recognition, you won't have the right to do union activity within the workplace. You're supposed to be working at work. If you're elected as the representative, you will. If you at those meetings where they consult with you on health and safety, you can put forward those ideas that you as a social activist in the union have. That training that you would have been given by Unison, put it to good use. But generally, you have to be careful that you in a private workplace that doesn't have recognition, that you won't be on a disciplinary for rabble-rousing when you should be grafting. So so yeah, so these are a few pointers. This video is a few pointers for you to start activism in the sort of workplace that privatised workplace that Unison represents. That Unison has as its membership constituency. So I'll leave you with that. I hope it's been of help. Leave comments below. My name's Tom Merchant. Good luck. Cheers now.